Hi everybody, welcome to another session. Today I'm going to be talking about Revit tips and tricks. Now, today I'm going to be talking about several tips and tricks. I'm going to talk about how to create invisible line type, how to make host object disappear within the current phase, how to do an inverted drawing, like black and white, and then convert it into white and black. And how do you add schedule cell color? How do you add revision to multiple sheets simultaneously? As well, how to prevent your object from moving using design option. Use multi-category tags to replace other tags. I also talk about global parameter to control multiple height. As well, the last bits, as a bonus, I'm just going to talk about how do you use model text instead of modeling. Hopefully today, the objective is you learn something. Now let's move on to the demonstration. So let's start with a new project. I'm going to start with the architectural template. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is how you create an invisible line in Revit. So the first thing I would do is click on line patterns. Okay, now what I can do is that I'm just going to create new, called invisible line. And in here, the first thing I'll do is just set the dot and space. What you can do is that just give it a huge value. Let's see what's the biggest value I can find. Oh, I can actually, let's just go overboard and see what it does. Okay, so what this will do is that if you give it a huge value, let's see, it's going to go infinite. Let's see how big this is going to go. What happens is that the dot's going to be from one instance to another. So let's see. Okay. Next, what you're going to do is that you're just going to create a line style. So here, I'm just going to go new subcategory and call invisible line. So in here, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to use the invisible line, and I'm just going to change that to white. So when I draw a line, okay, and change this to invisible line, so what happened is that it's still there, but you cannot see it. Now, why would you use this? So in most cases, what I typically like to do with this is I like to do a dimension and dimension so that your dimension actually stays as is. If you have like a wall or an object that you want to do, let's say for example, I want to customize kind of a setup. What you have is that you could move this particular object to, let's say, here, and you can just make it as small as possible. It's not going to see it too much. So sometimes what ends up happening is that you could dimension to, you can do this. However, the only problem with this is that if this thing ever disappears or gets deleted, what ends up happening is that your dimension gets deleted. In most cases, if you do a lot of dimensioning, you always want to maintain the dimension from disappearing, or if you're doing like construction documentation, what end up happening is that object will move, okay, and sometimes you want to control that. So what end up happening is that creating this line helps you to maintain the dimensions so that whenever you have contractors, you submit a drawing and contractors see this dimension, it's going to lock in place. I have worked with several job sites where user dimension it to the wall. And what ended up happening is that one of the junior guys actually moved the wall, and then the contractor would say, oh, what's happening with this wall? Last time you said that it's this dimension, and now it's a different one. So it's a good way to maintain the quality control, so that whenever this dimensions is locked into a detail line. So if this thing ever move, then you know that this is the original dimension that was set in place, and this object was moved recently. So it's a good way. It saves us tons of time when we do a lot of QA, QC, quality control. And what this does is that it allows user to see what's been changed from previously. Okay, so this is a pretty perfect, legitimate way of dimensioning stuff. I know that most often people have this inclination to why do we just dimension to the wall? You cannot control, even a larger project, you cannot control who's going to be monitoring or moving the wall. So what end up happening is that most of the time you have a specific dimension you want to keep, and sometimes junior guys will tend to move it. So just be aware of that. This is a perfect way to kind of create dimensions with a fake invisible line that you can't see. Now you're going to see, like when you're not going to see it, like when you zoom in, you notice that there will be a line there. So just keep in mind, okay? You can always move back and forth so that you don't see it. Most often when you print it, it's not gonna matter that much. Right, moving on to the next one. I'm just gonna go to list, how to make object disappear within the current phase. So what ended up happening in this particular case? I'm just gonna hide that for now. Hide in view category. Okay, let's assume you have an object. Okay, here I'm just gonna give it a slope. Let's say this one slope, sure, 18%. And let's load in an object. Yep, let's go with the sofas. So let's assume that you want the sofa. I'm just gonna go edit that. And I'm gonna say work plane base, just load it into the sample project. So let's assume that this kind of case, you're gonna put it in there. Now, what you can do with this host, right? Let's assume that this is the host. You can always set this object to new construction to new construction. So what this does is that it gives you this highlight. But when you set this from show all to show complete, you notice that it will disappear, won't see it. So the only way you can see it, I never use show all. Show all just basically show anything that's demoed and what's new. So everything is showed up. Most often, I would recommend if you are doing any phase filter, I always set it to show complete so that it's basically what you see is what you get, and what's been built is the actual thing. So that's how you make it disappear if you want to do it very quickly. Okay, the next one I'm going to talk about is inverted drawings. Okay, so let's open up this project. I'm going to close out of this. Close out of that. Okie dokie. All right, so this is a perfect project. It's a small building. So I'm not sure if you guys know there's a way to change your background to black and white. So if you want to do it, you can always go back to option. It's under graphics. You notice that there's a background. You can always change it to black. However, this will not do anything remotely because this is kind of like if you're going back to, if you miss AutoCAD, okay? Some people miss AutoCAD, so this is how you change it. When you print it, the unfortunate thing about printing, let's see, visible and preview it, it will still be black and white, okay? So how do you change this to like this type of look when you see it, like in a lot of the magazines. A lot of when you see a lot of architecture magazine, they usually have this white to black. How do you change it? So the first thing we're going to do, change it back. Photo option. Go to graphics. Just change it back to the original. Okay. So the first thing I would do is you go to VV. Okay. First thing first is you change the lines. Okay. You don't have to change anything. The only thing you have to change is color. What I would typically do is that you would change this to 254 and 254. If you change it to pure white, it will show up as black. So it's cheap. So I would normally just do that. And what I would do typically in the cut as well, it's the same idea. So you basically go in here, change this value, and say OK. As for patterns, so the first thing I would do is that you do solid fill. Okay. Color, just make it all black. This one, foreground, I would just say do the same and change it to 254, 254, 254. Okay, so once you do that, I forgot to expand them all. And make sure you select expand all. The reason why I would recommend that is because sometimes you're not going to see it until you expand everything and show up. Again, I'm just going to go back, repeat the same process. Same thing here. And hit apply. Okay, that's the first step. The next step you want to do is you go to graphic displays option. Okay, click on background, change it to gradient, and set this to all to black. Unfortunately, there is no way to basically change this to just single color. So you basically have to use gradient and just change everything to black. All right, it looks good. However, the topo will not respect the black and white. So typically what I would do with the topo is just change it to a value like 40%. Okay, and then when you start printing, you notice that the white, patch will respect black. So this is new in 2019. If you do it in 2018 or lower, what end up happening is that your hatches will always be black. So there's no way around it. Whereas the newer version, you can actually add black with hatches on it. So now what I can do is that when you start printing, say print, okay, current visible, let's see RHD print. Oh yeah, Microsoft. Yeah, I have to change it to Bluebeam. Okay, so here, when you go preview, when you zoom in closer, you notice that it's all black and white. Okay, so that's the trick. Okay, so if you really want that kind of like a look to it, this is how you do it. Is it useful? Not necessarily, but some people find it like, if you want to get that magazine look, how to get that black and white kind of a thing, this is the approach I would take. All right, the next one, how to add schedule color rule. Okay, so this is pretty useful for anybody who wants to do like add color. For example, like when you do a schedule, sometimes schedule can be very boring. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to add a value here. Okay. So first thing you do is that just add a yes and no. I'm just going to say color a role. Okay. It's not going to do anything at the moment. The next step you want to do is that you want to go into the formatting. Okay. You see that there's a conditional formatting. The first thing you do is that set the field to color roll equals to yes. And then this is where you're going to say, okay, I'm going to change this to a background. So here I'm going to use pink. You do the same thing for the other one as well. So make sure you always change, like if you select one of those roll, make sure you always say field condition set to yes, and just change that to this. Repeat the process. Okay, I'm here just going to do it quickly. Unfortunately, the issue with this method is that you cannot add multiple colors. I wish there is a way you can actually add, green, blue, or multiple color, so that you have a different types of formatting. But unfortunately, for this conditions, you only allow to change one particular color. That's the unfortunate. So you basically just have to ask Autodesk to, in the next version, to add multiple colors. So this one, we only gonna get yes or no. So that's pretty much your condition. Here I'm just gonna go conditional formatting, color roll equals yes, and change this to this color. Okay, so now once you have the set, now what you can do is that when I click on this, you notice that it changes highlighted. Okay, so that's a simple trick. I usually do this quite a bit, especially if you want to like highlight a certain important area. So not only does it make your cell much easier to read, but it actually gives some depth or separation between the two. All right, hopefully that's a useful kind of a technique. I use it quite a bit, especially if you're saying, okay, what's been changed in your drawing or what's been issued. Now you can use this method as well. So let's say previous sheets been issued, you can always say check, check, check. And then the sheet that's not been checked, it means that that drawing's not been issued before. So there we go. So next I'm going to talk about is how to add a revision to multiple sheets simultaneously. Right? In the past, I showed you guys how to do this, but here I'm just going to just repeat that method because it's a pretty useful thing. So the first thing you do is that when you go to view and click on revision, let's say assume that you want to add a next one. Numeric, I'm just going to put in today's date. Let's say this is a demo, tips and tricks demo. Okay. Set the cloud and say okay. So the next thing you're going to do is that you're going to add in a very simple revision cloud. Just make it like small, tiny one. Change it to tips and tricks demo. So let's say this is the size I want. Okay. All right. So you notice that it highlights that. So the next thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to copy it. Here it's not going to highlight it. So here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste, select, and align certain view. Now you can say that I'm just going to paste it all to this particular view. And what it does is that it automatically add it to all those sheets. Now if you want to turn those things off, and what you can do is you go to view, click on revision, and say none. Okay. So basically, it just hides all that stuff, and all your revision just automatically update. This is a very fast. It's very efficient because what this does is that if you have hundreds of sheets, rather than going into each individual sheet like this, right? Edit and manually check on, it's just too much work. Unfortunate part about this is that you cannot select multiple sheets and just change it simultaneously. So this is how you kind of overcome it. So you just draw a small piece of revision cloud, and then what you do is that you just copy and paste into the sheet you want. Now, if you want to get rid of it, you can do is that just get rid of it, just say merge up, or just delete it. Okay. So that's how you delete your, let's assume that you do not need this anymore. Just hit delete, yes, say okay, and that thing gets deleted. Right, pretty useful. Okay, prevent your object from moving and using design options. So here, I'm just gonna close all of it. Let's start out with, go new. I'm just gonna create a new project. Okay. Okay, so most cases, what people tends to do, I'm just gonna draw one. Oops. Okay, just copy it. I'm just gonna do it random. Copy multiple. Okay. I'm just gonna call this A. Now, the problem with the current setup is that there's a chance that someone will move this grid. Okay. So what I like to do, you could do is that you can actually lock it down. Okay, this is probably the easiest. Lock it, and then you just say, okay, don't highlight it, so nobody can touch it by pressing this button. Now, what I don't like about locking is that it prevents a person to, change the positioning. So what I typically like to do with this is that I'd rather put it into a phase so that nobody can touch it. So not a phase, I mean a design option so that nobody can touch it. So how you set it up, it's pretty easy. So all you have to do is just go to design option. Now in the past, I tell user never use design option because once you kind of set it up once, you basically set it to that particular phase, and if you want to copy from one object to one design option to another, you cannot do that. So you're stuck with that phase. But in this case, what you want to do is that you primarily want to do it just for locking things down so that it prevents other user from mucking things up. So what I do here is that I'm just going to call this grid plus reference. Same thing here, just rename it grid plus reference. So if you have like a useful reference plane that you want to keep, you do not want anybody to delete it. Typically how I do it is that I just basically go in here, click on this, and move it to here. Okay. Now what ended up happening is that right now nobody can move that thing. So how do you do that is that when you click on this, okay, or you just change it to grid primary reference, and you can just edit your thing. So it's a very powerful thing. Okay, so I like to do like this particular method because it actually helps you. And most often people rarely use this design option. Some people use it quite a bit. I use it mostly just to lock things down. Some of our users, they don't even know how the design option works, so I'm not going to tell them. Yeah, it's a good way to lock things down. If you have someone that's really love to move grids. All right, use multi-category and replace other tags. All right, so I know in the past what people tend to do is that they create tag for, let's say, different like door tags, wall tags, or different types of tags. So what I typically like user to kind of get the habit into is to create a multi-category tag. So what this does, okay, so the first thing you do is that how you create one is you click on generic. Well, actually here, this is the one you want, okay, multi-category tag. Generic tag, I don't think will allow you to change it, so make sure you always choose that. So the next thing you want to do in this particular case is that you want to change. Okay, so what's the difference between the regular tags and multi-category tag? Multi-category will have a set like shared common parameters between different objects. So mark type comments, model, manufacturers, they're all shared in common. So if you want to create the different tags for each one, let's say wall tags and all that stuff, it's going to inherit the same tag from this. So I do recommend user whenever you do this, select like comments as the first one. Comments is just for notes. So if you want to do noting, this is a perfect way to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do two types. This one I'm just going to say comments, show comment. And then I'm going to create another one, which is type comments. And here I'm just going to highlight it and say show type comments. So what I can do is that I'm just going to load it into this project. So in here, I'm just going to go in and say change that to 15 degrees. So comments, you can say, okay, this is a wall. Okay. I'm just going to rename this comments. And I'm going to duplicate one called type comment. Okay. And then here I can say this is going to be fire rated. Now, the benefit of this is that this particular object, you can actually apply it to see that you can actually use it. Mr. Exit light. Let's say this is toilet. So for notation, I would recommend using multi-category tag. Now this thing do have limitation. It will not tag railings, unfortunately. That's might be a bug, but in the future, hopefully, it will add it to that. So that's kind of like a downside to multi-category, but so far, it will speed up the process so that you're not using different tags for different one. So just keep in mind, railing, you kind of have to create its own separate tag. But for most of the other stuff, you could just use one tag to for comments, for type comments. You can even do marks as well. So if you want to do, like, let's assume that you have a door numbers and all that stuff, you can use multi-category tag. I'll leave that up to you. For most cases, I use it for like notes, right? Because it does help to speed up the process. So rather than creating tags for different one, I just say use one, and it just helps you speed up your process. All right, next thing I'm going to talk about is use global parameter control multiple height. Okay, so here I'm just going to copy a project. Let's see. So this is a tower. It's pretty useful. The reason why I say it's pretty useful is because in the past, what ended up happening is that whenever you change height for each level, what ended up happening is that if you have a group, okay, I'm just going to show you what this tower looks like. So this is what the tower looks like. Okay. So the first thing I would do is that first you set up the height for one of them, right? Let's assume that this height is what I want to change, and the other one also as well. You notice that here I have multiple heights. So here I'm just going to leave it as it is. So I'm just going to lock it so it won't change. So here I have multiple skin curtain wall that is 12 foot. Okay. So the first thing you do is if you want to initiate a global parameter, you notice that here it will give you a label. So here I'm just going to call this height. 12 feet. And then what you do is that you do the same thing to this one. So each one has to be individual. So I say height. You notice that it will mention there's a pencil there, so it means that it's a global parameter. So I'm just going to do this relatively quickly. In the past, what happens is that whenever you change height to height, project will change. Okay, sometimes client demand that you shave, let's say, 2 inches off from every floor. That could be a daunting task. So for a lot of users, that's it's pretty it can take a long time to basically change your floor to floor height. It means that some of your groups may be destroyed by the process. In the past, I had the same issue as well. So with the global parameter, what this will do is that it allows you to speed up the process. All you have to do is just set up a level and just have like one section dedicated to just only putting in all your global parameters so that everybody know that this is where you're going to modify it. Okay, just almost there. Okay, that's good. So this one I'm going to lock it. This one as well. Finally, do here. Okay, so now if you want to change floor to floor height, you go to Manage, Global Parameter. Here you can say, okay, I'm just going to move it up by 6 inches. I hit Apply. It will give you the error message. So say OK. And you notice that all the floor height changes simultaneously. So you're not going to get your error message from your current wall. You will get that wall highlight error. So please do check where it is. Sometimes it could relate to something else. But this one, I find it to be less damage to your groups. So if the level changes simultaneously, it will not destroy your groups. In the past, what ended up happening is that if you move all that level one by one, it will automatically destroy your groups. So for this particular one, it will not do that. So just keep in mind, you can use global parameters, very useful. I use it quite a bit if you have a scenario where you have to change the floor to floor. All right, finally, stop modeling and just use that. Okay, so I'm just gonna copy what I did as a demonstration. So I think the biggest challenge to a lot of users is that they love to model everything in Revit. But what I typically tell users that there's so many things that you can use. So here I'm just going to go in to the font, and it's probably one of the largest font you can find. So what this does is that if you do a lot of old building renovations and stuff like that, and sometimes finding objects to model, it can be a very daunting task. So what I typically like to do with this, okay, is use model Here I'm just gonna change that. Model text, okay? And when you zoom in, you notice that, okay, those are people, right? So rather than model it, you would just put a text to it so that you get that same look. So here, I'm just gonna go back to the font. You can go ancient. You notice that there's a lot of different types of font that you could use. This is one of the fonts that I've used, okay? And I put it into this model. Believe it or not, like some of them are just using just a simple simple text and gives you a pretty good result. And this one in particular, all right, all I did is that I just used the character map. And it's a pretty simple stuff. I think it's under wingding. There we go. You see, notice that right here. Gives you that result as well. And the grills, if you notice that, it's using the same thing. Character map. Yeah, it's using that. So the result of it is that if you want to do this more of landscape, okay, what this does is that those model objects will appear in your rendering, and it does a pretty good job in terms of giving the shadows and model objects. So I would just say, yeah, please utilize a lot of this object, because I've seen often people just have to like model every objects of it. And to me, if you can have a shortcut of your, if you can use a shortcut, why don't you use this? Because this model has already been created. So all you have to do is just put it in there and just extrude it. So if you're doing a lot of like a lot of heritage building, this is a very, very good approach. Because for this particular project that I've done is that I basically just use mostly model objects I could find. And then the rest is just using railing. Okay. Okay, so here I'm just going to change this to, there we go. So if I go down, you notice that right here, if I zoom in, yeah, it looks pretty good. So all those grills, as well as all the model objects. So this does give you a lot of alternatives. I've seen many people, they like to model this as real objects. You can still do it, but this one, since this is a heritage building, it could take a long time just to model it. So rather than doing that, I just use model text, ornaments, and just basically make them all ornaments so that, yeah, those are ornaments right there. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So you kind of have this nice blend to it. So majority of the time, you don't need to think about, what to put in there when you have model text. You can just do it as well. So hopefully that will inspire you to kind of, pretty much build anything inside Revit. Because this particular building is, it's called Hotel Vancouver. It's built in, I think it's the 20s. Yeah, it has a lot of this decorative stuff. Like 90% of the time, it works well. I would just say, yeah, please use it. Use that as your resources. So, guys, if you love this kind of a thing, just give a like, share it with your coworkers, and hopefully they find a lot of inspiration out of this. So that concludes this presentation. If you guys have anything else you want me to cover, yeah, please feel free to just add the comments or just email me. Thank you. Bye-bye.